Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you're enjoying the music to warm things up and get your body moving. Welcome, everyone, to the Wildlife Conservation Network's Closer Look series, which today is focused on spectacled bear conservation in Peru. My name is Tommy Sheridan, and I help to manage WCN's partner network of community-based conservation organizations all around the world. I'm tuning in from New York today, my hometown, and I love to see in the chat all the people tuning in from all over the world. We see people from South America and Cusco, across the pond over in Europe too, and across the USA. It's incredible to see what a diverse audience we have here joining us today to learn a bit about spectacled bears, which spectacled bears are actually the only bear species that are found in South America, and their scarcity makes protecting them very challenging at times, which our partner organization, Spectacled Bear Conservation, or SBC for short, knows very well. And SBC has been working very closely with communities throughout Peru's alpine and lowland forests to preserve spectacled bear habitat and their food supply. Because habitat fragmentation is an ongoing threat for this species. And so one of SBC's primary goals is to connect different isolated bear populations through land purchasing and conservation of lands. SBC also studies the biology and distribution of these bears to formulate effective conservation strategies. And they work very closely with indigenous Peruvian communities to improve the conservation of this bear species through outreach and education and alternative livelihood programs as well. So joining us today is SBC's team, two great members of the team leaders, Alex Moore and Robin Appleton. And Alex is SBC's executive director, leading the design and implementation of SBC's conservation and management work to protect spectacled bears in their dry forest habitat. Alex was born in southern Peru, and he has a very long-term commitment to protecting threatened ecosystems in his home country. Alongside Alex, joining today is also Robin Appleton, who is SBC's founder and president, and she has more than 20 years of experience studying bears and other wild animals in the field. She's currently also using her data that SBC has been gathering to complete a doctoral thesis in applied conservation biology at the University of British Columbia. So you guys are in very good hands today with Robin and Alex. So I'll pass it over to Robin to get started on the presentation.
Thanks so much, Tommy. Hi, everybody. It's great to see that we've got good numbers today. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Oops, let me go back to the beginning, make sure it's on the beginning. So I'll be starting giving a little introduction about spectacled bears. As Tommy mentioned, it's the only bear species in Peru. This is a public event, so I know some of you have already seen some of our events before, but just to give some information about the actual species that we're looking to protect. So SBC began in 2007 in northern Peru on the coast, actually. So everyone thinks of Peru as these huge mountain ranges and big forests, but actually there are foothills that come down from the Andes. And so that's where we began our work, as it's got great visibility. We were actually able to see these bears. And so spectacled bears are known as spectacled bears, or Andean bears, more used in science, but they're called spectacled bears because it looks like they have rings around their eyes, like they're wearing glasses. So it's a really great feature that they have, because we're able to identify every single bear and we can put names on it. We know who they are, and it's much easier to monitor them than black bears or grizzly bears, where you have to tag them and put ear tags on them.
So the heads up, we don't see your share screen just yet, but we see
the share screen.
No, not yet.
Oh no, okay, let me try it again.
But we see the beautiful bear poster behind you.
Oh, that's nice. Maybe I just didn't even do it. So
there we go.
It's starting on you see here? Well, you saw that's a black bear behind me. But so here's our spectacled bear. Do you see it now? I'll start the slideshow from there.
We'll see the whole thing.
Okay, let's do president interview.
There we go. Perfect.
Now? Okay. There's the spectacled bear. This one actually doesn't have the full rings, and some of the bears that we've identified do have almost complete rings, but it's actually not that common. So often it's like a spot or a line or something like that. It is not always a complete ring. So here's just a really quick map. It's the range of spectacled bears in South America. So they start in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and then small populations in Bolivia as well. They're sort of scattered little populations throughout South America. And this is mainly because of the loss of habitat. So habitat's being destroyed at astronomical rates. So you can see here, this is the dry forest, and it's being cleared for huge plantations of sugarcane, rice, corn, and so on. But also as you go up the watershed, we're also seeing a lot of destruction from open pit minings, which then contaminate water sources that go down to the numerous villages below. And so not having access to these really critical areas, bears are having a hard time in this particular area, keeping on fat and able to raise their cubs. And so what we're seeing is the bears are actually starving to death, and the cub mortality rate is really high. So while that all sounds really depressing, we actually have a really great team out there on the field that are working tirelessly every single day to try to keep these bears in the wild. And so that brings us to the purpose of this presentation, which is actually to talk about Machu Picchu. So in 2022, we had the opportunity to begin a conservation project in southern Peru in the Machu Picchu Historical Sanctuary, which I think most people have probably heard about. But Machu Picchu, if you haven't seen it, is a stunning 15th century Inca citadel that's considered to be one of the world's greatest achievements in architecture. So the Machu Picchu Historical Sanctuary is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most important cultural areas in South America. So this surrounding historical sanctuary, which covers an area of about, I think it's 125 square miles, features numerous archaeological sites. So it's not just about Machu Picchu, and it has incredible diverse landscapes from rainforests to these high alpine peaks. Oops, let me try to change that. So Machu Picchu was likely built around 1450 at the end of the Inca Empire. It was a royal estate, which the Inca Empire used as a seasonal retreat from the nearby capital of Cusco, which isn't too far from this area. And about 750 people lived in the citadel, serving the emperor in various capacities. So people most often think that this is what Machu Picchu Park looks like. And in fact, it's so much more diverse than it is, than you would normally see. So people don't really think of even Peru as mountainous and glaciers, but there are huge peaks. And so this is the highest peak, called the Salcantay, which is over 20,000 feet. So the elevation goes from a really high glacier, as you can see here, the alpine lakes, to then down to tundra. And then the feature has this dense humid tropical forest. So this, as the elevation increase, there are a lot more montane or cloud forests. And then as you go down, there's an actual small portion of the sanctuary that's actually dry forest. So they have very little precipitation. So in terms of ecosystems, it's spectacular. You can see these huge mountain passes in the background. So this is just a map. You can see that top blue is the amount of percentage of glaciers and snow-capped peaks, and then lighter green going down to the darker green being the cloud forest. And then over to the right is the small amount of dry forest. But it's going to be really interesting as we learn more about bears to see how often they use that. So I'm going to just pass it over to Alex now.
Thanks, Robin. And thanks everyone to be here listening to us. Okay, probably some of you know the story of Machu Picchu, but just to give a brief background. In July 1911, Hiram Bingham arrived at Machu Picchu. The little known story about his arriving there is that this Yale professor, and also was a politician, he just paid one Peruvian sol, around $0.25 to a local villager, to take him to the citadel. So, but after that, when Bingham made 3 more trips to Peru, during which time he collected an estimated 40,000 artifacts from the site. All these artifacts were supposed to remain at Yale for 11 months for study, but instead of that, the university kept them for the next 100 years. So Bingham made a lot of studies around the area with many maps. And when Machu Picchu was discovered by Bingham, the ruins had been largely forgotten for everybody, except for some families that were living in the area. So when Machu Picchu was known as the lost city for the scientific world, actually it was in very good condition. It was covered by vegetation, but it was clear enough to show the wonderful building made of stone, which was fit in almost perfect joints. So that's the next. This is how Machu Picchu looked like when it was discovered. And as you can see, all the ruins can be appreciated in a very good way. So all the discovery was an entire National Geographic magazine was dedicated to this discovery as a new, again, as a new citadel discovered for science. But yeah, it was a big debate about that because even where for the scientific world, this was a new discovery. Actually, there were some Peruvians living in the area. So most of them were in relation with these ruins and the vegetation around. Back to the bears. The Andean bear has a great cultural importance for local communities, considered in the pre-Hispanic belief such a connection between the apus and the man. And as a subject of legends that were more recently influenced by the colonizers, in which a bear, for example, took a woman who were taking care of cornfield to his cave to later have a child with her. There is an annual celebration around Cusco in which people is dressed like bears, like in the photo. They're called ucucus, which means bear in Quechua. All these people hike to the snow peaks to give thanks to nature. They put their hands in the snow for several minutes of part of this ritual. That is amazing.
So Machu Picchu was declared a historical sanctuary by the Peruvian government in 1981 and a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. Since then, the site has become Peru's most visited tourist attraction. If any of you have been there, you would know what I'm talking about. I mean, there's people everywhere. And in 2019, they counted 1.5 million annual visitors. So it's a lot of people to have in one area. So UNESCO experts have often lobbied for the inclusion of Machu Picchu in the United Nations list of World Heritage Sites. This site is threatened by deforestation, massive landslides, and urban development, such as tourism. So there were a couple of animals present in the sanctuary that supported the recognition of this, of the historical sanctuary of Machu Picchu as a protected natural site. So bears being one of them, the Andean cock of the rock, which is the national bird of Peru, and then the taruca as well, that's not commonly seen.
Okay, this very beautiful mountain toucan is one of my favorite birds. In February this year, we were checking our cameras in Machu Picchu, and yeah, as usually during those months of the years, the Inca Trail is closed. So I was so lucky to be in there and to watch many birds, some of them new for my live list. And yeah, the diversity of birds in the area is amazing. More than 443 species, many colorful birds like this tanager, like the hummingbirds, but also one of the biggest groups with high diversity in the areas are the orchids, like these in these photos. There are more than 400 species, including some new species for science, which were discovered in the last recent years. 29 of these orchids are threatened, and most of them are in danger because of the forest fire and habitat loss. The plant diversity, as Robin says, is incredible because all these different ecosystems that are in Machu Picchu, with more than 3,000 plant species, Machu Picchu is habitat for almost 20% of the Peruvian flora. But not only plants and birds, but also more than 300 species of butterflies, dozens of insects, 26 reptiles, and 16 amphibians. And yeah, from the mammal biodiversity, this mountain coyote, for example, is one of the 84 mammal species present in Machu Picchu, which is 15% of all the Peruvian mammals. There are some endemic species like, well, this vizcacha is a small population of this vizcacha, which is in the middle of the ruins. So some of the scientific believes that this could be a different group or different population of, or maybe a subspecies. And yeah, so all this is incredible from for a study, for biologists, for everyone who wants to see nature in the wild.
So, well, that's all really great. As I mentioned, having 1.5 million tourists coming through there in one location in 1 year is a lot of people. And so that's one of the challenges that the park is facing is how do you manage a protected area with such diversity and incredible ecosystems without having an impact? This is a video that should play. So this was taken during a peak time of day. Obviously, the bear got into the Machu Picchu ruins and couldn't find an exit. So the park guards, this was filmed by a park guard, trying to pull the people away, everyone wanting to take a photo. But you can imagine the stress that this species, a very elusive bear, and what it feels walking through these ruins at this time. So you can see it's doing the lip, it's putting out its tongue and it's tapping its lips. That's what it does when it's really stressed out. So at last, this bear finally found its way out of the park. But it's a pretty stressful experience, and this has happened with females and cubs as well. So it's not ideal, obviously, for bears. But it's not just the ruins. It's also, many of you have probably heard about the Camino de Inca or the Inca Trail. So the Inca Trail is a historical trail used by the Inca that cuts right through the middle of the park. There's 500 people a day going onto the trail. That includes, there's a porter for every person that's also on the trail. And so there could be a lot of potential impact for the area and for the park. We were hiking the Inca Trail last year just as our preliminary study, and it literally is like a traffic jam. Or I always say to people sometimes is when you're attending the ticket booth at your concert and it's just one row of people. So starting in the morning, it starts at 4 a.m. with the porters, and at 7 to 9 o'clock, it starts with the visitors, and it's just one single row. And then there's the topic of the porters as well. So you have to go on a guided trip and you have to take porters with you. And they do try to control the amount of weight that these porters are carrying, but it's really difficult to do that. The government does a great job. They weigh the bags, but often they pass the scale and then they can add more weight to that. So it's a hard one to control. And then the park has been seeing a lot of wildfires in recent years, partly to do with the adjacent communities, with the burning as well, and just with climate change and the change over time of ecosystems. So they're working really hard and bringing people from around the world to train up their park guards to help control these fires, but it wouldn't take a lot to wipe through that entire protected area. So it's something that's really, really scary. And then the Ministry of Culture is also heavily involved in the protection of the sites, but it's also managed by the Ministry of Environment. So it's one of the few parks that has both ministries. And so you have this part with the ruins and you have park guards there as well. But with all of the tourists and the bears coming through, we're trying to create more collaboration with both of the ministries, not just the Ministry of Environment, but as well as the Ministry of Culture. And this was actually filmed by them. This is one of the sites in the middle of the park.
It's not gonna attack you, please. It is afraid. It is afraid. Yeah. It's looking for food, but it's not allowed to feed them. Because if you feed, they will stay here. Yeah. So they have to return back to its home.
So unfortunately, we presume that that's actually probably a fed bear, could be by tourists, and there's a lot of people coming through, and people love the idea of seeing a small bear and giving it food and being able to take wonderful photos, but that bear is not afraid if it's going up and pushing the back of somebody. So how do we manage the tourists and the people and all of this without impacting the bears? And especially, you never want to have obviously an apex predator, a large carnivore being habituated to humans or food conditions. That makes it really unsafe to people as well. So in 2022, so last year, we began working with the Peruvian government to help protect this incredible park. This is also our goal is also to work with the indigenous communities surrounding the park. And the ultimate goal with the government and all of these indigenous communities is to actually create a UNESCO biosphere reserve. So a UNESCO site covers internationally designated protected areas known as a biosphere reserve. which are meant to demonstrate a balanced relationship between people and nature, but it also works to foster the integration of people and nature for sustainable development through poverty reduction, human well-being improvements, respect for cultural values, and by improving society's ability to cope with climate change, which is something we're looking at as well. So if we are able to accomplish that all together with so many different collaborators, the idea is to protect 1.7 million acres of land, which will also be adjacent to another UNESCO site called Manu. So that is our goal in the next few years.
Okay, well, there are more than 40 people working for the Machu Picchu National Sanctuary. All of them part of the Peruvian National Park Service. And yeah, they are very open to collaborate and support our project. And actually, that's very good because in all the previous experience that we have had, this is the first time that we believe all the support and that all the effort that we can do can be supported by this very group of people working for the park. And yeah, next week we're going to start our project there. Part of the big work is going to put camp traps, so Robin is going to talk about that later. But we also have experience with collaring bears. We're going to use this experience to collar around 6 bears probably. And yeah, we have just hired a veterinarian to be part of our group. And yeah, she's very well. She has a lot of experience with wild animals, which is rare in Peru, but yeah, she's going to collaborate with us. And as part of the training that and this collaboration that we have with the SARNAB and the Park Service, during the last January, a group of park guards and a reserve manager came to visit our conservation center in northern Peru to share experiences in the research of bears. And it was the first time for them to be in a dry and very hot ecosystem. It was a very good opportunity to learn about the experience of each other. And yeah, part of an example of this training season, for example, when the park guards in Machu Picchu put camp traps before, they just have few detections with rather than our experience when we put with the same before, we have around 70 detections with 21 bears that we have registered in the area. So that's the experience that we have shared with them. And now all our staff, SBC staff and the guard parks in Machu Picchu are all of us ready to go to the field next week and start this incredible and very challenging work.
Yeah, I think the use of words from Alex is right. So challenging. It's funny, as we get closer, we're starting next week. And, you know, when you're doing stuff on paper and looking at maps, it all seems so easy. You just chuck a point on there and you say, yeah, we got this, we can do this. And then you remind yourself by looking at these photos, oh, wait, it's going to be a really challenging field site. It is a really challenging field site. It's super dense, but luckily, from some of our pilot studies, we've seen that the Incas were wonderful in leaving us some trails throughout the park. So we do find some areas like this that make it a little bit easier to traverse, or trails like this that you kind of question where you're actually going because you look like you're walking up into the clouds and that's it. But it is incredible as you walk through these ecosystems, you find ruins spread throughout the forest. And that's something that's going to be really, I think, helpful as well for the Ministry of Culture. We're going to be exploring new areas in detail that others have never been. So I think that's going to be an opportunity to hopefully provide more information as well. So we do find bear trail. This is a photo. It doesn't look like a trail, but that's actually bear trail. So we do see a lot of sign throughout the site, and even actually off of the Inca Trail. So it will be interesting to learn more about the impact of tourism and people through the park. But we find bromeliads scattered throughout the park. This is a typical bear food, though. They pull it out and eat the bottom of it. You can see here. And then also these little day beds and nests that the bears are making throughout the site. This is a video here that was filmed by a park guard. And so it's really interesting to see probably how human habituated they are. So this is the first time the park guards had seen this bear, and it's, you know, they were backing up and then the bear was coming towards them. They were backing up. So this is a young bear, but very curious about the park guard. So as Alex said, we're really excited about the potential of this upcoming study. We had started with a couple of pilot studies just to better understand how easy it is to detect bears in this area, if it's going to be challenging. And some of the preliminary data coming from the park itself was a little bit concerning, just the fact that they hadn't identified too many bears. But now working with the park guards, they've been better trained at finding bear sign, installing cameras to make sure their detection goes up. We were actually really excited from 40 cameras detecting 21 bears, as Alex had said, and only across a couple of months, and having more than 70 detections. So as we embark on this new study, it's going to be really incredible to see what we find. But these are just a couple of the photos coming from the original camera traps that we put out at the end of last year. So there's incredible diversity, ocelot cats. And then this is a coati that, while we were visiting San Diego, had just mentioned that this is potentially a subspecies as well. So working with the park guards, and also this was one of our interns from the area, Maria, it's been incredible. They know the park really well, which is something that we haven't experienced in the past. And often a lot of the park guards don't have the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the fields, but these park guards, there's 40 of them, manage a lot of the different stations and the Inca Trail, but they also have the opportunity to go explore the park for a month. And so that's given us some really good insight and information so that we can set the stage for our upcoming field study next week, which is taking our entire team, everybody, even the vet, a lot of our staff. So we're going to be in the field for the next month, traversing these huge mountains, going, as I mentioned, from 2,000 feet up into 20,000 feet. So the mountains are big. And just to give you a little perspective, that's 3 of our camera traps you can see, and they were randomly placed throughout the entire park, every square kilometer. So every mountain we've got to hike up. So when you look back at that, that's why I said everything's really easy when you're doing it on the computer and you look at those, you're like, oh yeah, that's fine, we can do that. And originally we said 2 weeks, so we've doubled our time now. So we'll see how that goes, but that's basically what it looks like. So it's going to be really interesting, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity in the fall to share some of our findings. After we take down the cameras and we go back and collect all the cameras in September. So we're all really excited, and hopefully we're able to get all of those cameras out. So again, thanks so much for joining us today. And I think we're going to take some questions now, if anybody has any questions. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Wow, incredible, Robin and Alex. Thank you so much for sharing such a cool presentation about your work and now the expansion into Machu Picchu. And it sounds like you have a big month ahead of you in Machu Picchu. So good luck traversing a lot of these mountains. But I think, yeah, we have tons of questions from the audience, and we have about 30 minutes or so. So we're glad we caught you before you guys have to venture out into the field to try to answer some questions from the crowd. So if you don't mind, I'll dive right into them. We could try. There's more and more pouring in. So audience, keep them coming, and we'll try to get as many as we can in the next half hour. One of the first questions we got was from Ruth Nichols, who asked, is it possible to make land purchases adjacent to habitat that you guys are trying to protect already to expand it in order to save it from potential other alternative forms of development?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think so. That's a program that we're running in the north, is purchasing key parcels of land, and that's that opportunity is something we're always looking at. The area surrounding the park is mostly owned by Indigenous communities. So if it's Indigenous land, then we work with the Indigenous communities to protect those lands, but there are private parcels. And so as we learn more, if we're finding there are key areas that have titled private land, then that will absolutely be an option. So just like the north, buying those key areas and keeping them safe forever is really important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a growing strategy for SBC. So if you're interested in learning more about land purchases, please reach out to our team, because SBC is always looking to make more connectivity for these bear populations. Robin, I think that a similar question, either you or Alex could both answer, from Sandy Briggs. She had asked, have there been any attempts to foster populations for spectacled bears in other places, whether it's in Peru or in other countries that might have less tourism traffic, because it's clear that the high traffic is affecting the habitat. So maybe you could share more about the population genetics of these different disconnected bear populations and how the challenges of transporting them as well. Yeah.
I think one of the things we have to think about too when we're looking at conservation is that every area has some kind of major threat. It's pretty hard to find a pristine, intact ecosystem. And one of the things we've learned most in the north in probably just the last year is how important the national park is adjacent to the area that we've been working. And we actually feel now, this is just a hypothesis, but that if that park was not there, we have a feeling that this important, rare, unique bear population wouldn't even be there. And so the fragmentation in all the other areas is so high that we're finding, especially in the north, just one bear, one random bear, and a bear here and a bear there. And at some point we do have to look at, we're basically doing conservation triage. And so we're having to decide, do we just let this population become extirpated from that area? Are we going to remove those bears and put them into the other population? And that's, as we learn more in the north, we've been there for 15 years. So we have a lot more tools in our toolbox, where Machu Picchu, we're starting at basically zero. We don't even know how many bears there are, what their major threats are. And I think, we know that there is some impact from humans, but we haven't actually quantified that. And so, I'm from Canada, and in many of the places that we live, bears have learned to live around communities and have coexisted. And so perhaps they're not as affected as we may think they are. So we did see a lot of bear sign adjacent to the Inca Trail. So perhaps they find times of day to eat, or they've changed the way they live in that ecosystem, and it hasn't necessarily affected their overall health of the population. And so, yeah, we don't know what to expect yet. And it's going to be really interesting to start learning more about that area and then the impact of tourism overall, I think also for other populations around the world as well, other species too. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Building on that question, a few folks, I think Jacqueline, David, and Paula all asked about the quotas for tourists. So Alex, maybe could you tell us about Machu Picchu? Are there current restrictions on the number of visitors at any given time in a day? And if so, is there ways you guys could help improve that as well?
The areas, the management of tourism I think is good. Even when Robin says all the Inca Trail has a lot of people. Well, according to the restrictions, around 5,000 people is walking around the Inca Trail. The thing is that there is no enough information on what is the current capacity, I think. So the regulation is good from the perspective of how many people you can control in the different poles and how many people can walk around. But what is unknown is what is the impact in the ecosystem, which is part of the study that we want to do from the bear perspective, for example. So that I think is, but we have heard that there's some new ideas to open new Inca trails. But we that's why we also want to do this study, because we need to understand what is the bear habitat use, and probably if this is in a potential Inca Trail, we should put some regulation around that. So that's the kind of information that we want to give to the reserve managers. So that's why I said about that.
Something, Tommy, it was really interesting when we were talking with the head of the park guards. He was just saying during COVID, when the ruins were shut down, he said they could go out and frequently just see bears grazing all around that area and around the park, and they just kind of came out of the forest, and then as soon as the people came, they went back in again too. So I mean, they know that there is going to be some impact, and like Alex said, they are trying to regulate the number of people. And I think the park itself is 10,000 a day, and the Inca Trail is 500 a day, but on top, that's every single day. So I think, that they're always looking at ways of generating more funds. So by opening up another Inca Trail, then they can add another 500 people a day, and then another Inca Trail, and maybe there's another, so at what point, does it actually really have a huge impact? So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think go ahead.
Just to add that, if there is a regulation that during the first 2 months of the year, January and February, the Inca Trail is closed for tourism. So that's when I was presenting, I said that if just the car parks and people who's making research can walk through this month. And during those months, it's supposed to be the repairing of the Inca Trail and preparing for the tourism season.
Yeah, which I think you guys mentioned that the number is 1.5 million tourists per year, which is a huge amount. So I saw in the chat that a few people have also been to Machu Picchu themselves. I was curious if you guys have any recommendations for potential travelers who are interested in visiting Machu Picchu, things they should just keep in mind as they approach to respect the wildlife and the people that do call the place home.
Do you want to answer, Alex? You want me to?
Yeah, well, the main recommendation is, yeah, I think that there are many signals, and park guards talk a lot what you should do, not give your trash around the Inca Trail, or you are going to the if you see a bear or something wildlife, you just keep away of that. And I think that you have to plan your visit. You have to make all the other recommendations that the park guards give you when you are going to the area. So, and if you find something interesting, that's my other suggestion, that you just talk to the people like us and tell us if you see a bear, to see what we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah, be an ally for conservation, and also, yeah, as citizen scientists, I think, to be a part of all this. So, great advice.
I think, Tommy, it's really important to, we all know that we make change in society when we put political pressure. And I think one of the challenges, and one of the things I see coming from a different country when I'm in Peru, is the importance of the pressure from the outside world. And that's what we're saying even to the Ministry of Culture. So people want to see ruins, but they also care about seeing ruins that don't have garbage and that aren't being destroyed and burned all around it. And I think when you do the Inca Trail, you have to go with a company. So how you choose that company and the questions that you ask that company, and what are you doing and how are you treating your porters, and ask that. And, you might hear something, and when you're actually out there, you might see something different. And I think putting that pressure on the companies that are working in that organization, as well as if you see things you don't like, is also communicating that to people and sending emails out and saying, because one of the things we noticed, they said, oh, the porters are, that whatever, they're supposed to clean up after themselves. And there's areas in the sort of base camps, I guess, for bathrooms, but we saw toilet paper scattered throughout the whole trail on the outskirts of the, like when you just go off the Inca Trail, you'd see garbage and things like that. So I think there needs to be a lot more pressure that's something we're going to be looking at from people and from visitors and tourists, and saying it's not okay what I see, and I think it's important to notice that. And like Alex said, you communicate that either with NGOs working in the area, which there are many, and directly sending emails to the government too, and questioning what you see as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great advice. I think ecotourism clearly can be a great cosign of conservation efforts and support of natural ecosystems, but it can also, if it's not done sustainably, have its damages as well. So this is great advice to keep it in check. We have a few more questions about the biology themselves of the bears. And so I think it'd be great to hear. Inez had asked, how long do cubs actually stay with their mothers? Because obviously it varies for different bear species, but for spectacle bears, can you tell us more about their upbringing?
Yeah, so we in the North, we studied for those 15 years sort of reproductive success, and it may differ in the South. I imagine it probably will. The bears seem to have a lot more weight on them, so their health is probably better as well. But what we're seeing in the North, if the cubs actually survive, they only have a 40% chance of survival to becoming independent of their mothers. But if they do survive that first year, they typically leave around 13, 14, 15 months from their mothers. So they don't seem to stay with their moms long. The females start feeding again, and they actually go into estrus or ovulation, and then they breed again, and so on the cycle starts. So yeah, so we're finding about 14 months probably on average.
Wow. Okay. Really quick. Can you tell us a bit more? Then Robin, you alluded to the work that SBC had done in the North, and maybe you could take a moment of like pride, to see how far SBC's team has come from just a small team in Northern Peru to now working in such a historic site in collaboration with the government and so many other partners too. So congratulations to you guys on the huge expansion of your work, and it shows a great cosign of the incredible work that SBC does. But a few people in the chat, Stephanie had written to ask what will happen to the current work SBC has been doing in the North with this new opportunity that's arisen.
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody knows that being a conservationist is a really tough job because you have to do, I just keep saying conservation triage. So we have to decide where we can put our resources, and we also need like a plan A, B, and C. So in the north, we've been working there, as I mentioned, for 15 years, and that's exactly what we've done. So we've been collecting data, and when you're working with a species that's been so understudied, we have to actually use research to help us understand how we can protect them and how we can be really efficient with the resources we have. And we feel that we've done that. And so much of our work now in the north is monitoring. So we will be monitoring every single bear that we can through the camera traps. And so we're keeping those in the field, and we're continuing to run a campaign right now for land purchase, which I think is about 3,000 acres of really pristine habitat. And it's a key area for bears. And so those are key conservation actions. And so what we've been doing is collecting all those data, and now we're applying that data to conservation action. But the thing is, we have an incredible team that have spent 15 years basically living amongst these bears and really are incredible at tracking the bears, getting the cameras, having a really high detection. And so I think that's something that we can offer the government in Machu Picchu. And so what we're doing is continuing our programs. They're continuing to run. We're expanding our education, building an interpretation center, and we're going to continue working with those Indigenous communities, buying land. And in the south, we're sort of starting it again. So we're doing a replica of what we did in the north. We're just starting as we did 15 years ago. However, I hope it doesn't take 15 years to get the same questions answered. So we should be a lot quicker. We have a much bigger team. We've also learned a lot along the way. We've made a lot of mistakes. And so, yeah, we're starting with the research, asking those questions, and then we'll move into more social programs with Indigenous communities and basically do a replica of what's happening in the north. So if funding permits, but our priority is always the north. And I always mention this to people. Our plan is never to go into one area, work there for a while, and then move on. And so when we go into an area, and that's what we said to Machu Picchu, we're committing to a long-term program. Once we figure out what those threats are, we're going to look at how we can help, how other organizations can help, how the government can help, and so on. And we're going to keep doing that over time because habitats are changing, people are changing, climates are changing, and we need to be on top of that if we want to keep these the species alive in the wild. So,
absolutely, yeah, and that's something I think we're always looking for at WCN. So we always applaud SBC for your commitment to the place that you work and the people you're working with as well. It really takes a long-term commitment, and also true from our supporters too. So thank you to everybody who's been supporting SBC from day one to see how far they've come, and hopefully much more success in the future too. Robin, on your note about trying to improve and be quicker and scale up with your big team, we had a question from Ed Miller who asked if SBC makes use of any machine learning or like AI algorithms to help the process of camera trap content. Because we know that can be a long time that conservationists spend processing camera trap footage. So can you tell us how you guys approach that?
Yeah, well, up until now, we have a team of biologists and volunteers and people that go through the photos and remove all the blank photos. But as part of our goal in the south of Machu Picchu is to start working with other collaborators. And so the San Diego Zoo is one of those collaborators, and they've actually been working on software that can start doing that. So you teach the model basically to decipher which animal is what, and they can put it into categories. So all we would have to do is look at the bears and then just start identifying individual bears. So that is going to be a huge game changer for us. So that's all San Diego's work, and that's just hopefully one of the benefits from doing this type of collaboration. But yeah, that's going to be incredible because it is a very tedious job, and when you get hundreds of thousands of photos, it's a lot of work, especially with all the blanks. In the Patamo, it's terrible. It just starts firing and more photos of grass and heat and whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, and the more free time we can spare for you guys, the more you can focus on actual conservation outcomes and stuff. So,
yeah, totally. And it's all in great timing because supposedly all that software is going to be ready when we're pulling the traps out in September. So we're already sending some photos down to San Diego to start teaching the model how to decipher the different species. So hopefully when we pull those camera traps, it's going to be just send them down to San Diego and have them upload them. So we'll see.
Yeah, brilliant. Ed, if you had any comments about your own expertise in that field and algorithms or computer learning, then please, yeah, feel free to comment in the chat too and share with SBC. But thank you. Okay, so some more questions. One was about the health of bears and people there as well, from Leandre. She asked, is any zoonotic disease from a One Health point of view a problem? So how is SBC aware or helping to prevent any disease between tourism and wildlife in the area? Or do you know if that's a threat at all?
Yeah, so that's something we're doing now in the north. And Alex mentioned we've just hired a vet on our full-time staff. So she just started a couple of weeks ago, and partly for the collaring, but actually a big portion of her job is to work on a vaccination program and also a sterilization program in all of the villages that we're working with. We're seeing more and more sort of feral dogs coming to the water holes. And when you have such a vulnerable population like we do in the north, any sort of disease coming through there, especially if there isn't a huge genetic diversity of each individual bear, could just wipe through that population and basically kill them. So yeah, that's something we're definitely thinking about. In the south, we don't know what that looks like yet, but we do see a lot of mange and hair loss, which could be related to hormones, could be related to disease we don't know about. So it's going to be really great having her on staff. And that's one of the first projects she'll be working on is looking at the dog situation in the villages, but also looking at what she can see with the bears just through vision, just through all the photos that we have. So.
Yeah, I think that you just raised a great point about how this is all interconnected to the fragmentation of the population. So we have some more questions about that connectivity. And one is from Ruth, who asked, is there any like multinational effort to establish a continuous corridor for spectacled bears, whether it's from Venezuela to the southern end of their range? Could you guys talk about maybe like your long-term dreams and goals of the spectacled bear corridors or connectivity?
Do you want me to talk, Alex? Do you want?
I think this ideally we should connect all the habitat of the bears from different kind of protected areas of conservation measures. And that's, for example, what Robin says in the presentation. There is an initiative to create a biosphere reserve around this Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is also joined to a regional protected area, which is managed by the regional government. So we want to start with Machu Picchu, with the studies in Machu Picchu, then we should have some information to move and trying to understand how is the use of the bears in all this big landscape. And with that information, we want to support the creation of this kind of biosphere reserve, which is a kind of corridor at the end, because we want to give to all this landscape different types of use and different kinds of protection. So I think this is a more, this kind of biosphere reserves, which are some additionally in Peru, there are some models that can be used as a corridor. I think that in Ecuador, they are developing a legislation to create corridors as that kind of feature. But in Peru, I think we need to figure out with different, with different efforts of conservation, protected areas from the national ones, private reserves, purchase land for conservation, have community agreements. And yeah, in this case of the Machu Picchu, I think that's why we want to support with all this process for the biosphere reserve. And in northern Peru, I think it's probably the same, but as this dry forest population is a bit isolated, we need to, we have some agreements with local communities. We are working with indigenous communities also to create a protected area. We want to purchase land. So I think it's building that kind of corridor piece by piece. And at the end, we hopefully can join all the pieces in a big map.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good long-term dream. Go ahead, Robin.
Oh, I think, Tommy, I think in theory, it all is wonderful. And would be ideal if we could, you looked at that map and it's like these little patchy populations spread through South America. But just to give a little bit more perspective or context, there are numerous small organizations trying to work with spectacled bears in Bolivia and Ecuador, Colombia. And they're incredible biologists and they're working to try to collect more information and work with their governments, but everybody is so underfunded. And I think that's the biggest challenge in places like South America. I know up here in Canada, I mean, there are numerous bear biologists. You get funding from the government, you get these great grants to do stuff. And that's the biggest challenge. And so that's one of the reasons also for us working a bit in the South, and it's to join forces, because I think alone we're doing what we can with the resources we have. And, a little bit goes a long way. So sometimes people feel that $5 donation is not worth giving. It really is. And I really can't emphasize that enough. So always trying to contribute with whatever you can makes a huge difference. But also joining with other organizations and trying to put our funding together. And that's what I was saying with the triage. When you're doing this sort of triage, you just have to let things go. And so the more money we can put together and focus on those key areas, then I think it's a lot more achievable to create these UNESCO biospheres reserves or start looking at the bigger picture, which is, we have strategic plans for the 25 years. And that is our goal, especially in the north, is trying to create this contiguous area that goes right up to the border of Ecuador and ideally goes with some of the organizations up there. But it's very costly to keep working in new areas. So that is our long-term goal. And hopefully there's still habitat available in the future to protect.
Yeah, I hope so. If we work quick enough and work collectively enough. Yeah. Thank you guys. That's a good dream, and hopefully we can make it a reality. I think. We have some more questions about, I think, a lot of the human wildlife conflicts, which I think you guys could share more about, potentially, like your work collectively with indigenous peoples in Peru. One of the questions was about, like, we understand these conflicts with tourists in Machu Picchu, but can you talk more about historically what are some of the conflicts between indigenous communities and these bears, and what SPC is doing to help reduce and improve those conflicts?
Do you want to answer, Alex?
Yeah, just first of all, the presence of people in Machu Picchu is actually before that the reserve was created. So probably around 40% of the Machu Picchu was owned by different families. So there is cattle. So during the years, we know that the Park Service has tried to have some agreements to stop growing all the farmer lands inside the reserve. And I think they have stopped some of the growth of this kind of land. So, but around the Machu Picchu is where the main challenges is. You know, most of the forest fires come from the outside of the park. So when people they need more training, they need more capacity to manage the way they do the cut and slash. So yeah, I think this is all the Machu Picchu is a very complex area because they have had people living in the area before the park. So probably these people were hunting bears before. Now they're not hunting because there have been a lot of education with these families and some agreements. But the main challenges that I see is around the park. And that's why also this manager of the reserve has requested our study, because they want to understand how the bears are moving to the landscape outside of the park. So if a bear is well protected inside the park, is good, but if this bear moves outside, then there's problems out. So that's I think that's the main challenge. We need to understand more about this, but probably during the next month, where we are in the field, we're going to know more about that.
But absolutely. I think also, Tommy, I think part of that question, they were asking what we've done. And so, of course, we have to go back to the north, but that conflict with humans, I mean, that's happening all over the world. And a lot of our WCN partners deal with human conflict and retaliatory killings all of the time. And so when you're working with large carnivores, there's often a lot of attacks on their cattle. So we're starting to see that a lot more now as habitat shrink, there's a lot more pressure. And for a bear, if you're thinking about it, like the energetic cost to go and eat or capture a young calf or something like that is pretty easy for them. So we've had to look at that approach that differently in each of the communities that we're working with. But for some of you that may already know the project, our SBC, we do this outreach alternative livelihood program called the Felty program. And we make little woolen ornaments. And so our approach, we can't pay every single person that loses a cow to a predaceous attack by a bear or something like that. And so what we're trying to do is create these relationships with indigenous communities that we're working with, and also provide them with another income, another way of supporting their families. And so this program, somebody might put up our link, but we've trained over 200 women now working in this program. We're making close to 40,000 products this year. And so as we really scale up and expand this program, our impact in each of the communities is huge. So in some of the villages, we have every single woman that's available to work in that program. And so that's really huge at helping us. There's one community that in the core bear population that we haven't quite entered yet. So we've been working on them, and we've been trying to even make meetings, and it's really funny. So as soon as we go to them and say, hi, yeah, okay, let's not talk about conservation or anything else. We just want to come in. We want to start this alternative livelihood program because we're doing it across all the village adjacent to the national park. So are you interested in doing something like that? And as soon as you do that, the doors open a lot easier. And so that's our way of kind of getting in and starting to build the relationships. It takes a long time, but once you've done that, it's a lot easier to start dealing with these issues with the conflict or asking people to change their behaviors. I mean, this is their livelihood. You can't just say, sorry, like, and that's what happened in the past. They just put national parks and said, oh, sorry, you're out, you're done. And so we need to be creative in that. I mean, it's up to them really at the end of the day. It's the people that are going to be protecting those bears. So yeah, we put a lot of resources and emphasis on that. And again, purchasing our product also helps that. So for every bear, every product we sell, that's one more person having a job. So if you have a chance, check out our website, and especially near Christmas, that's a really great time. They're awesome Christmas ornaments. And so, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Robin. Yeah. So we are reaching towards the end of the time. We only got about 2 more minutes. And we got to most questions. It was incredible. Good, productive half hour. But I just want to reiterate Robin's last point about Megan had just shared in the chat a link to the Felty sales that SPC helps to manage. So check out those Felty ornaments, and if they're a gift, you don't have to wait till Christmas. You can make it a summertime or June, July, August gift. Whenever you'd like. They're really beautiful, and they help to support people in Peru to coexist with bears. So please, help support that if you can. Otherwise, please, if you're interested in making a donation to Spectacle Bear Conservation, there's also a link in the chat for that, because any amount helps to improve this coexistence between bears and humans. So I just want to say lastly, as we're wrapping up, thank you so much to Alex and Robin and your entire team at Spectacle Bear Conservation. We only got to meet the 2 of you today, but we know it's a big team in Peru that is contributing to this every day. And you have a big month ahead of you trekking through the mountains of Peru. So please stay safe and take care of yourselves. And we hope it's a fruitful time in the field as well. But thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. Thanks, WCN, for also hosting this as well, for everybody for joining as well.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
And if you guys are interested in joining, our next Closer Look will be on Friday, June 16th. And that will be with one of our partners in Malaysia called Hutan, who works on the conservation and coexistence between humans and orangutans. So we hope you can tune in for that talk in June as well. Otherwise, we hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, get some rest, and stay connected to wildlife as much as you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.